Robert Henry was my great-great-great-grandfather. And he bought 770 acres. He owned 770 acres, which covers a big area, the school and all that. And he paid $1,200 for it. That wasn't bad, was it?
No.
So he did that, and he left 11 acres for our cemetery. They said it was 9 one place, but it was 11 acres he left. And then when in the year 1897, Asheville School was going to put this big school here, boys' school. And they came to buy this whole tract of land that Robert Henry's family had owned. Well, when they came, they got near the 200 acres nearly, but then they said they wanted the cemetery people who was supposed to be family, but it wasn't. It was somebody appointed as being the guardians, and so they said, you've got 11 acres here and you don't need it. We'd like to get 8 acres off of you. Still leave you 3. So the guys, they wasn't really family, but they said, yeah, we'll sell it to you. And they sold them the 8 acres for $6. So that cuts us down now to 3 acres, which is plenty. You can see how much what we've got here. So anyway, that was the story of how much land he owned.
Where did he come from?
He came from, he's Scotch-Irish, and his dad came over in around 1740, and he was born in 1767 here in Asheville. It was right out of Asheville, a place called Swannanoa, but he was born over there. And he grew up here, over there in that area. And when he was about 10 or 12 years old, he got sick. He didn't get sick. He had one of his dogs. He had a big dog, and it went mad and it was rabid dog. The rabies. So his father wouldn't go anywhere without him because he's afraid he'd go crazy. You know, rabies works that way. So he took him with him, and he said, "Son, I've got to go to Mecklenburg County. That's down in Charlotte." And he says, "I've got some business down there, but you've got to go." So he took him down there, and they had a lot of people gathered there. Robert Henry didn't know what it was, and he told Robert, he said, "You go over and sleep in the corner." He took his coat off and put him in the corner. And about an hour or two later, they was hollering and shooting in the air, and he scared him, and he got up and he said, "What's Daddy?" And he says, "We've just declared our independence. This is called the Mecklenburg Declaration." It was a forerunner, the big one. And he was there, and that was his daddy. And so they came back home. They decided that's when the Revolutionary War. That's what started.
Wow.
So, well, I mean, they were going to. That started the wheels turning. So when he come home and got to be 16, he joined the mountain men, and they went down to waded across the Catawba River to a place called Kings Mountain in Charlotte. In that famous battle down there, he fought. He fought down there, and he fought in a big famous battle. And when that happened, a British ran up at him and lunged at him with a bayonet, and he had his rifle in this hand, and the bayonet went through here and went into his shoulder, and he fell. But when he fell, he pulled the trigger and killed that man, killed the British, and his comrades came up, and they had to put their foot on his shoulder to pull that bayonet out. But he survived. He survived the war, and came back to Asheville and started studying and taking courses, and he got a law degree, and then he became the first seated lawyer in Buncombe County. Seated means, I guess,
licensed.
Licensed. And that's when Buncombe County went from Asheville to Georgia. So anyway, he was the first seated lawyer here, and he was the first school teacher in Buncombe County, and that means it went from Asheville to Georgia. And it was called, they built a school here, and it was called the Old Academy School. And that's how the cemetery got its name. My family always said, oh, they're buried in the Old Academy, and that's here. So, but later, renamed the area Sulphur Springs, because he and his slave Sam was walking, and they found this spring down here and named it. I look pretty bad this way. I can't even think. But anyway, sulfur water. But then it carried the name Sulphur Springs all that time, and then it switched over from the Old Academy to the Sulphur Springs Cemetery. They changed the name later, many years later, but this is the Old Academy Cemetery. This is still the historical life of Robert Henry. And this is a picture of my grandfather and my aunt, my daddy's sister. This Robert Henry was buried out in Hayesville, which is near the Georgia line. And my granddaddy went out and put the tombstone up. You see it's got the braces holding it up. They cemented where it would stand. And here's what the tombstone says. This is a picture of Robert Henry right here. My grandfather's father. And it says Robert Henry, born April 1765, died born April 1765, and he died February 1863. So he's 98 years old. It says he was okay. Now, it says he's a pioneer, a lawyer, a physician. He was also the first schoolmaster in Buncombe County, and undoubtedly the last of the heroes of Kings Mountain. He was so young, he outlived all of them. So this is a big history of that, and there's more stories about it. So that's my grandfather, and this is where he left his cemetery, and a lot of Taylors are buried here, and a lot of Henrys, which of course is my family. And
So a Taylor married one of the Henrys, and that's
what happened? Newt Taylor was a gambler. He didn't have a good reputation, and he wasn't very well liked by the Henrys either. But anyway, but I should stick to my grandfather really.
Okay, go ahead.
Because my grandfather now, so this is what he did. He did all this, and he was born and raised here. And then there was a man in Waynesville called Colonel Robert Love, and he wanted to create Haywood County. So he wrote the President of the United States, which they both knew, because during the Revolutionary War, and said, we're having trouble. We want to make Haywood County out here in western North Carolina. And the president said, well, in order to do it, you need to divide North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. You need to survey it. So he said, he told Colonel Robert Love, you get a team together, and he says, by the way, Robert Henry has his surveying license, see if you can get him. So what happens, Colonel Robert Love sends to Asheville here and wants to know if Robert Henry will come out there and talk about joining to divide North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. And they looked at it. And so Robert Henry said, well, I'm going to go out there. And he took a horse and went to Waynesville and talked to him and joined the team. And he looked over and saw a pretty girl there. And it was Colonel Robert Love's daughter. Her name was Dorcas. Robert Henry by this time was 48. See, all this time had passed. So he asked Colonel Robert Love if he could marry, and he said yes. So she was 17, and he was 58, or I believe it's 58, and they got married. And that's how come Dorcas ties in with the Love family, because Colonel Robert Love founded Waynesville. And she was named after Colonel Robert Love's mother, Dorcas Henry. So that's how Robert Henry ties in with the Love family. Dorcas is buried right over here. This is something unusual. 30 years after he married her, they divorced. And that's when he moved to where I told you. But anyway, Hayesville. But she stayed around and she's buried here. And it's unusual. You go to the cemetery in Waynesville where the Love family is buried, and she's got a little tombstone here, and of course they're all there. But Robert Henry had a lot of money too, so that was how Robert Love tied in with. Robert Henry tied in with the Love family. So this is where it's been, and this is where the family's been buried. It's been here a long time. The first man buried here, I've got his name written down. I've got all that written in. I can't remember it all, but he was born in 1834, the first one buried here. And then about 30 slaves back here and some Indians. And when they were rounding the Indians up to take Rutherford, the man, you see the signs everywhere with Rutherford Trace where they came through with 2,000 soldiers to get the Indians to put them in Oklahoma. The thing is, they rounded them up, and some of them died. And when they died in this area, they'd bring them here and put them in our cemetery. They have to bury them somewhere. So there's some Indians back there. So this is basically our cemetery.
So those Indians who were about to start on the Trail of Tears but died.
That's right, yeah. For some
buried right here.
Yeah. Or they could have died maybe on the Trail of Tears coming through, but this is where they buried some of them. And of course the slaves are on unmarked graves. There's a lot of them back there. They just put them and put a stone up. But now one of them's buried back here. The one that helped him, so his best slave Sam, which he liked, he buried him here. He's the one that was with him when they discovered the springs down here. He's got it back there. Slave stars. These weren't slaves, but they didn't put much. They were carved out like, these were buried in the ground, so just this much sticking up. But they've had dates on them, but they just, you can't see them. You have to take a brush or something. And they're look here. I'll show you my. You can't see that. That says 18. See the 18 there? 1845 probably. You see the 18?
Maybe.
Yeah, but like, oh look, here's the 8. See the 8 there? And there's this, and then the round spot. This is the only one that had a name on it. You can't see it here. It has to be cleaned over. It says B-I-L-L, Bill. You won't be able to read that. Can you see the markings on it? That's the only one. I've got a picture of it, but it keeps deteriorating. It says Bill on it. Because the slaves, they would give them their own, name them American names when they were. African slaves of long ago gone but not forgotten, which is okay. I had these. I go to this dollar store, and these were real pretty when I put them up. They last about a year, and then they started deteriorating. See, I had that. But anyway, and the bench looked good for a while, but now look at it. Somebody stuck a flower in there. But I'd like to get this fixed up. These were slaves, and they died, and like in this book that was written, well, another slave died, and they bury him, and nobody seems to care. That's what it says in it. One of her so-and-so slave died, and nobody pays any attention, like it's nothing. How much pretty timber is in here, don't you? Look at that. I mean, boy, there's a lot of logs in here could be used for timber. A lot of old woods. Yep. There's a few that have died lately, but they're still pretty good trees.
Could you log some of this?
Oh, yeah.
Get some funds to restore the cemetery that way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If we're going to expand, we will too. I've just never cut any. Yeah, I mean, it's all in my name. I wouldn't have had it changed, but I wouldn't abuse it. But you're right. Somebody said, Well, when you clear off, just cut some timber and pay for it and let the bulldozers come in. See, we're going to be running, in another 50 years, they'll be running out of space, but and it's here for them. You know, all they got to do is clear it off. And I don't know who's going to be doing it, but I won't be here.